I'm Lenessa Sardich, and in this video I'm going to show you the 4 things that helped me write my best online article yet so that you can do the same. Writing online can be hard and it can take a really long time to figure out what works. These 4 things have helped me go from safe and boring writing to writing that's riskier, more entertaining, and actually brings your personality out. And hopefully it can help you do the same. And don't forget to stick around till the end because I'll give you 2 bonus tips on how to write better. All the links I mentioned in this video are also going to be in the video description below. So let's hop to it. The first thing that helped me write this article was writing a clear outline. I'd written outlines before, but they're usually just a really messy bullet point list of ideas. I hadn't really scoped the content properly because I assumed I knew what I was going to say. But when I started writing, I was still in the divergent stage, coming up with new ideas, connecting them together, moving things around, and as a result, it took me way longer to write these articles, and they were way longer than I had intended them to be because I wasn't clear on what I wanted to talk about. But when I wrote this last article, it was a guest blog post for Vancouver Startup Week, and I was forced to write a very clear outline and get it approved before I started writing the article, and it went a lot better. So let's take a look at the outline that I wrote. So you can see I have a working title at the top for the actual article, and then I clearly outlined all the subheads that I wanted to cover, and then I had clear bullet points for every single one of them. They were actually in full sentences, just so it would force me to be concise about what it is that I wanted to cover under every subhead. I also aimed for short paragraphs, so I only did 2 to 3 bullet points per subhead. There's also quotes that I wanted to put in the articles, and finally you can see that I didn't write the introduction or the conclusion. That's because I usually write that last at the end of the article. I just think it works better that way. So this is the outline that really helped me write a way more concise article in a much faster way. So why is writing a clear outline important? When you don't write a clear outline, you end up multitasking while you're writing. You're thinking about what you're going to write and you're doing the actual writing. So that means you're still organizing information. Like I said, you still have new ideas coming up, you're moving things around, and it makes it really hard to shape the content and stay focused on what it is that you want to write about. Overall, it's inefficient and it takes way longer to write. But when you write an outline, you're not doing that multitasking because you're actually scoping the content and setting your boundaries ahead of time, which makes for a much easier writing experience and much faster. So for this article, for example, it only took me a day to write it versus before it would take me at least a couple days to write the entire blog post. The second thing that helped me write my best article was studying modern online writing. And what I discovered is modern online writing has become very casual and conversational. It's not formal at all. It's really important to use simple language and avoid any jargon. It uses a lot of subheadings and very short sentences, which makes skimming a lot easier. The key thing with short paragraphs and a lot of spacing around your writing is that it lowers the perceived difficulty of reading the text. No one wants to read a thick wall of text. It's exhausting and they're probably just going to click away. An example of good online writing is Neil Patel's blog. So let's take a look at one of his articles. What I love about Neil Patel's blog is that a lot of his articles are very casual. It's like he's talking to you in normal conversation. The title, for example, "Content is King, ... but why?" Then in the introduction, "Tired of hearing content is king?" The other thing he does is uses single sentence paragraphs, so it doesn't feel like it's going to be hard to read this, especially in the beginning. Then he gets a little bit longer here, but they're still very, very short paragraphs. He uses a lot of subheadings and they're pretty descriptive. So where did the phrase "content is king" come from? As soon as you scroll down, you hit another subhead. Users in Google like quality content. Again, another subhead. The idea is when you're going down the article, you can easily skim to understand what it's about and also find the parts that are most interesting to you. Overall, this doesn't feel hard to read because there's a lot of space, no thick paragraphs. The perceived effort of reading it is really easy. So now I'll show you how I incorporated these elements of good online writing into my article. So taking from modern online writing, you'll see that I used really short paragraphs, almost 1-sentence paragraphs. I have really frequent subheadings as well, and I try to make them descriptive. I also tried to bake in a little bit of curiosity into the subheadings and make them unusual, and hopefully also reflect my sense of humor. You'll notice that I use a lot of colloquial terms as well. And what could be more legit than partnering up with TransLink Legit is a very colloquial term. Same with shout out, just really using the casual language to make the writing conversational. Candidate posts getting backed up, customers started piling in, so really casual terminology. So this is how I incorporated modern online writing into my writing. The third thing that helped me write this article was studying copywriting. This is probably the most interesting part for me. So in studying copywriting, I discovered Joseph Sugarman. He's a famous copywriter and the author of the Adweek Copywriting Handbook. This one sentence in his book helped me finally understand the mechanics of copywriting. The sole purpose of the first sentence in an advertisement is to get you to read the second sentence. Basically, copywriting is optimizing for attention and speed. The idea is that people keep reading because they're curious. So you have to keep piquing their curiosity and then satisfying that curiosity. I know this is for advertising, but applying this concept to my writing made it a lot more enticing to read. As I continued to study copywriting, I came across the concept of conversational copy, which is basically writing how you talk. A really good example of conversational copy is what you see on the hey.com landing page, which is an email service built by Basecamp. So let's check it out. This is the hey.com landing page, and if you just scroll a little bit, you'll see there's this letter from the CEO, and it's really casual. So, hey everyone, email gets a bad rap, but it shouldn't. Email is a treasure. It feels like they're talking to you like a friend. It's really easy to read, no jargon. Apple just let it happen. It's a little bit dramatic. Now email feels like a chore rather than a joy. It's really empathetic as well. And you can see the paragraphs are pretty short. There's some one-sentence paragraphs actually filled with some very short sentences. So how do you write conversational copy? For that, I used Harry Dry's Guide to Conversational Marketing. He's the founder of Marketing Examples. So let's go through a couple of these marketing examples for conversational copy. The first tip is don't write at the reader, but involve the reader in your copy. So address them directly and basically talk to them as if they're there and make them feel involved in your writing. The next tip that helped me was starting sentences with conjunctions because they flow better. Conjunctions are words like but, and, now, because, so, yet. What they do is increase the speed of the writing and make it a lot easier to read. The last tip that really helped me was using contractions. This is where you basically shorten the word. So instead of saying what is, you put what's, it's, there, there's, you'll. It just makes things flow easier and makes the copy a lot more casual because this is conversational copy. And now let's take a look at how I incorporated these lessons from copywriting into my article. Right off the bat, I start the first sentence with, it's the day you've been waiting for your whole life. The goal with this is for the reader to read the second sentence and then the third and so on and so forth. So they're probably curious, what is this day you've been waiting for your whole life? They shortly find out it's the launch of your first ever startup. But starting with a conjunction, tomorrow never comes because you failed to account for a global pandemic. So we now know there's a global pandemic. What happens next? So what do? I'm involving the reader. I'm asking them, what would you do? I'm using a lot of contractions just to get the speed up. And here you can see if your imagination like mine went straight to AI pigeons and teleportation, I'm trying to get their imagination going so that they're engaged and actively thinking about what could happen instead of just being a passive reader. Then I have, they say startups are hard, but what happened next was just uncalled for. And that's right after the launch date and lockdown subheading. So you can tell it's going to be something about a launch day, something about a lockdown. They're going to keep reading to the next sentence to find out what was so uncalled for. Finally here, when we think of startups, we often think of new and innovative technology. The idea is using we makes them, again, involved in the writing and creates that empathy. So you get the idea of how I incorporated copywriting into my article. So the fourth thing that helped me write this article was actually giving myself permission to bring my personality and my humor into my writing. It's what allowed me to finally find my voice as a writer. Bringing your personality and humor into your writing isn't easy. When I was writing this article, I knew I was taking a really big risk. With the type of humor that I was incorporating, the language, the conversational nature of it, I was really uncomfortable and I was actually scared that they wouldn't approve the article. But what I've realized is that these are all good signs because exceptional writing is a result of taking risks and pushing boundaries. One of the inspirations for bringing in my personality and humor into my writing was Morning Brew, the newsletter. So they have a very distinct personality, they're humorous, and It creates a very memorable read, not only because the story is memorable, but it's also memorable for the brand. So let me give you an example. This is from the March 25th issue of the Morning Brew newsletter, and it's when that whole thing in the Suez Canal was happening that I'm sure everyone has heard of. And it's particularly this part that got me, and it goes, "The Ever Given's ill-timed perpendicular park job is acting like a Wendy's Baconator to global trade circulatory system, creating massive traffic snarls on either side." Not only is it hilarious, obviously, but you can see they use references to a lot of familiar objects and concepts. Ill-timed perpendicular park job, Wendy's Baconator, global trade circulatory system. These are all terms and concepts that we're familiar with that really create that empathy for the reader and make the story more relatable. Also, the use of vivid imagery like this, a Wendy's Baconator, there's an element of delight there. It's unexpected, and that's what makes the story memorable that we're reading about, but also the brand of Morning Brew and how they tell these stories. You know you're reading Morning Brew. So now let's take a look at how I brought my personality and humor into my article. What I did was just write down any words and imagery that came to mind instantly without any filter. So this is pretty much just my raw humor out in the open. The first example is using Pigeon Box was like having a Christmas stocking year round, except the stocking was a hard metal locker and you needed a code to open it. I'm using a simile here. It was like having a Christmas stocking, a reflection of my very silly and stupid humor. It's really not like a stocking because it's a hard metal locker, but I'm making a reference to a familiar object and concept, which is the Christmas stocking, to both entertain the reader and make the story relatable. This is my next example. The day that Pigeon Box was slated to launch in 3 SkyTrain stations in Vancouver was the very day that the global pandemic decided to set its foothold in Vancouver. The only foot traffic in a citywide lockdown would have been that of actual pigeons. And they were not the target customer, although those pesky creatures would have loved to be. So what I did here is I personified an inanimate object. The global pandemic definitely does not have a foothold. I know technically a virus is an organism, but let's just agree that they don't have feet. Actual pigeons here is a play on words with Pigeon Box, hopefully entertaining for the reader. And then finally, when I refer to these pigeons as pesky creatures, it's a reflection of my personality. I don't like pigeons. I think they're annoying and I think they're scavengers, basically, no offense. So I gave them that personality and the motivation of, wanting to be involved and wanting to be the target customer, even though we all know that's not possible, but it creates a funny image. The next example is, as the state of the world rapidly declined and iPhone users discovered their phones could no longer recognize them. So again, I'm using a familiar and funny concept to involve the reader and create that empathy. A lot of people know that iPhone users couldn't open their phones anymore because they had a mask on, so the facial recognition wasn't working. Obviously, there's a little bit of irony baked in here because your phone not recognizing you was the least of our worries during a pandemic, but it creates that empathy again for the reader with those familiar concepts. The next example is, while most of us were annoyed that we had to wait 2 months for our banana bread baking tins to arrive from Amazon, again, using a familiar concept to really create empathy for the reader and entertain them. Finally, this was actually my biggest risk in the article, and it goes, although driving around in a philanthropic version of Grand Theft Auto was certainly appealing, the Pigeon Box co-founders knew that they wanted to return to their original vision for Pigeon Box smart lockers. I made a really risky assumption here. I assumed that the readers will know what Grand Theft Auto is, which I know not all of them will. But for the ones that do, they'll be entertained by this sentence. The second risk I took was the risk that I might offend someone with the reference of a philanthropic version of Grand Theft Auto. Maybe some people aren't going to like that, but the whole point is that writing needs to be a little polarizing for there to be raving fans. So people should either really love your writing or not really like it. You can't be everything for everyone, so you really need to be polarizing to get those people that are going to be really, really into your writing. So that's pretty much how I put some of my personality and humor into my article. Again, just very raw, no filter. I just used the imagery that came to mind right away. So now that we've covered the 4 strategies that have helped me write my best article, I'm going to show you the 2 bonus tips. The first tip is to pay attention to your rate of revelation, the rate at which you're revealing new information to the reader. Nicholas Cole talks about this in his book, The Art and Business of Online Writing. He's a top core writer. And the idea is new information is what gets the reader to keep reading. Like I said, online writing is optimized for attention and speed. So you should really be revealing new information to the reader almost in every sentence to keep them hooked. My second bonus tip is to document any funny, unusual, or memorable phrases, words, or imagery that you come across in your daily life when you're reading or you're doing something, because you can use this in your future writing. I got this idea from Joseph Sugarman. I mentioned he was a famous copywriter, because what he used to do is save offbeat articles from the newspaper to use in his advertisements later. So 4 things that helped me write my best online article yet. The first, again as a summary, is writing a clear outline. Second is studying modern online writing. Third is studying copywriting. And fourth is giving yourself permission to bring out your personality and humor in your writing. And don't forget those 2 bonus tips to help you write in a more entertaining and compelling way. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and leave a comment. And if you want to read the original article that this whole video is about, it's also linked in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you next time.